In 705 AD, the marble halls of the Tang imperial palace echoed with a single scream. Lady Wang, once one of the empire's most graceful noblewomen, was dragged through the corridors, her silk robes torn, her dignity stripped away. Moments later, guards began wrapping her trembling body in layer after layer of wet silk. But this wasn't a punishment of rage. It was deliberate, calculated, a method so psychologically devastating that Chinese historians tried to erase it from record for over 1,000 years. This was the silk cocoon torture, a punishment designed exclusively for the empire's most privileged women. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why many begged for the sword instead. Today, we uncover how beauty, status, and silk, the very symbols of refinement, became instruments of psychological annihilation. The Tang dynasty, from 618 to 907 AD, is often called China's Golden Age. The Silk Road carried wealth and ideas from Persia, India, and the Mediterranean. Art, poetry, and science flourished, and for a brief moment in history, so did women's power. In this world of luxury and learning, noble women were not simply ornaments. They held property, managed estates, and even influenced imperial politics. And at the center of this world stood silk, the material that defined beauty, civilization, and status itself. To touch silk was to declare refinement. To wear it was to announce rank. But beneath that elegance was a culture built on fragile honor. Confucian law dictated that a woman's virtue, her chastity, obedience, and modesty, represented not only herself, but her entire family's moral worth. To lose that virtue was worse than death. That's why the punishment that used silk itself, the symbol of nobility, as a weapon, wasn't more cruel. It was psychological warfare. The origins of this method are unclear, but the earliest surviving references appear in Tang court archives and Buddhist monastery records. According to these texts, the practice began as a way to punish women of the aristocracy who were accused of crimes too shameful for a public execution, usually treason, adultery, or political conspiracy. The logic was cruelly elegant. Beheading or hanging was too vulgar for women of rank, but exile or imprisonment was too lenient for those who defied the throne. So the state found a punishment that destroyed both body and status. Victims were stripped of clothing, already a humiliation in Confucian culture. Then their bodies were wrapped from neck to toe in wet silk cloths. The silk was soft, glistening, and deceptively delicate, but as it dried, it tightened. Hour by hour, it constricted the body like a living serpent, suffocating blood flow and crushing the ribs and chest cavity. The victim remained conscious through most of the process, feeling each tightening layer as the silk contracted. Records from the Daizong Monastery archives describe it chillingly. She felt the threads whisper as they shrank, and cried that each breath was being stolen by her own robes. But the horror wasn't only physical. This method was designed to erase identity. For an aristocratic woman, silk was her life. It clothed her, decorated her chamber, adorned her children, and defined her worth. To have silk become the instrument of death was to see her world, her very self, turned against her. In Confucian thought, a woman's face, her honor, was everything, and to die naked, bound, and helpless beneath layers of silk meant eternal disgrace. Witnesses were often required. Other noble women were summoned to watch. The message was unmistakable. Your beauty, your wealth, your refinement, none of it protects you. We can turn your pride into your destruction. It was social annihilation. By dying this way, a woman's reputation was erased, her memory unspeakable. Families could not mourn her without risking association with treason or scandal. This is why in court records, victims were often noted as having died of illness or vanished from service. The silk cocoon erased not only the woman, but her existence.
And then came the woman who would master this art of psychological control, Empress Wu, China's only female emperor. She ruled from 690 to 705 AD, the same year Lady Wang's screams echoed through the palace halls. Wu Zetian was brilliant, ruthless, and politically unmatched. But she lived in a world that viewed powerful women as dangerous. Every move she made was judged by male scholars and courtiers eager to destroy her legitimacy. So Wu did what few rulers dared. She weaponized fear, particularly the fear of moral corruption. The silk cocoon punishment became her silent instrument. Instead of publicly executing female rivals, which could appear petty or insecure, Wu framed their deaths as moral purifications. According to the Old Book of Tang, noble women accused of treason or adultery were sentenced to the silk's embrace, a euphemism that cloaked the horror behind poetic words. One of the most infamous cases was Lady Zhang, the wife of Wu's stepson, Crown Prince Li Shan. Lady Zhang had grown too popular within court circles. She wasn't plotting rebellion, merely becoming influential. That was enough. Wu's verdict was simple. Let silk reveal her true nature, beautiful to the eye, but deadly when bound to ambition. The execution took 14 hours. For the first 4, all court ladies were required to watch. Afterward, they were ordered to continue their duties in silence, as if nothing had occurred. That silence was the real weapon. By Wu Zetian's middle reign, she no longer needed to use the punishment often. The idea of it was enough. Aristocratic women began wearing plainer clothing, avoiding public influence, and withdrawing from political affairs. Even poetry written by women during this period reflects fear of attention. Lines like, "The silk that warms may also bind," appear repeatedly in Tang-era literature. This was psychological conditioning on an imperial scale. A single method of execution reshaped how an entire class of women behaved. When the Tang dynasty fell in 907 AD, the silk tortured nearly vanished from all written record. Later dynasties, Song, Yuan, and Ming, officially banned it, not because it was too cruel, but because it caused widespread trauma. Buddhist influence grew, emphasizing compassion and spiritual balance. Executions were meant to deliver justice or penance, not humiliation. Silk torture served no purpose but psychological destruction. By the 10th century, it had disappeared entirely, or so historians believed. Then, in the 1970s, archaeologists uncovered scrolls from a ruined monastery in Shanxi province, records describing the method in clinical detail, confirming that the legend had been horribly real. The texts included diagrams showing the silk wrappings and temperature notes to time the contraction rate. The scientific precision revealed that this was not random cruelty, it was designed. The silk cocoon torture was more than an execution method. It was a psychological mirror of its time, where women's virtue was both weapon and weakness. It represented a society that could transform beauty into punishment, luxury into death, and refinement into oppression. And perhaps most chillingly, its core principle still exists today. To use someone's source of pride, status, or identity against them, that tactic has never gone away. From public shaming to digital manipulation, modern societies continue to exploit the same psychological mechanism, turn their strength into their weakness. The silk cocoon has simply changed form. So the next time you see silk in a museum, a fashion display, or a piece of art, remember Lady Wang and the women of the Tang court. Remember how something as soft and beautiful as silk once became a tool of absolute control. Because in history, beauty and brutality often share the same thread. If you found this story eye-opening, subscribe for more dark and hidden truths of ancient civilizations. Next time, we'll uncover the secret torture rituals of medieval queens and how they turned elegance into execution. Until then, remember, history's most beautiful surfaces often hide its darkest secrets.